You guys. Boom. All right. You know the book. I mean, if you've listened to any of them by now. Little book, long title. What is it again? Turn Your Magic All the Way Up, a ridiculous guide to discovering yourself after narcissistic abuse. Available on Amazon. Link in the description below. I must say, with all that's going on politically, I'm not a big fan that it's available on Amazon, and I'm glad I'm offering it for free here. And that's all I'll say about that. Hey guys, it's chapter 14, which is drugs. So if you've stuck around this long, my cat is looking at me funny like, why are you talking to me? I'm not talking to you. If you stuck around this long, this is where it gets fun. I mean, not that it wasn't fun before. I've at least tried to make this entertaining as I went along. Anyway, chapter 14. We're almost to the end. There's 19 chapters here. So let's get cracking. Oh, yes, and the Spotify playlist link. I don't know why I forget that every damn time. I wrote this book with a music soundtrack because as I was writing it, I had music playing in the background. And I thought, you know what? I would like to know what my authors were listening to when they wrote their books. And why don't I just include it in my book as I go? So if people are curious, they can sing along or listen along as they read. Whatever. Anyway, the Spotify playlist is in the link in the description below as well. Here we go. Chapter 14. I hope they allow this on YouTube. Drugs. Song, I Want to Do It All by Terry Clark. Disclaimer. Illegal substances are dangerous, addicting, and potentially lethal. Not to mention that illegal part. I truly am a unicorn when it comes to drug use. Not everyone can pick it up and quote unquote try it and put it down again like I seem to be able to do thus far. I acknowledge that fact. Hopefully you do too. I am here as your go try that and report back person. So proceed with caution. That being said, I may ruffle some feathers when I say this, but drugs can be fun. I have experienced the pure joy of true enlightenment, and I have tried the drugs that attempt to replicate that feeling. Drugs are simply the attempt at a synthetic form of joy, but once you feel true joy, not from drugs, but from that woo-woo enlightenment thing, there is no substitute for that. The real thing just can't be replicated. It's pretty euphoric. If it's what the religious say they experience, then I can see why they keep coming back for more. Unfortunately, a lot of church-going people are faking it, though. I believe very few religious people are actually enlightened. My dad was a narcissistic alcoholic throughout my entire childhood until the age of 12, when he was forced by his boss and my mother to go to rehab against his will. He never touched the stuff again, but he very much remained on the narcissist spectrum. Since it ran in the family, addiction has always been a concern of mine. In my country bar, two-stepping days, I drank Wednesday through Saturday nights every week, but I never did learn to like the taste of alcohol. Being drunk was fun, but the hangover the next day was never worth it to me. I usually had a beer just to give myself something to hold while standing around, hoping to be asked to dance. Shots were fun and an easy way to get a buzz going quickly, but I was never a blackout drunk type, and I was always happy and a little too friendly when I was loaded. I was pro-alcohol, but anti-drug of any kind back then. I was quite the teetotaler in my late teenage years. At that time, I was hanging out with my half-sister and her new group of friends who all enjoyed pot. I was never offered any. I wouldn't have taken them up on it anyway, because back then I was a judgmental jerk and always said, I don't need that. I'm high on life. Lord. I hated cigarettes because I grew up with my dad smoking like a chimney and they stink. Of course, that later changed after I started socially smoking, only when I drank at first, and then it just followed me home. I am currently trying to stay away from those addictive little suckers and doing well. Song Follow Your Arrow by Casey Musgraves. It wasn't until well into my 30s when marijuana was just starting to be legalized in California that I allowed myself to finally try it for the first time. Ironically, I didn't even try it in California. I tried it with my neighbor in East Texas while I was still married. My neighbor was quite the weed connoisseur. He had been smoking marijuana since he was a teen, and still is, by the way. He didn't really like the newfangled vape cartridges or weed tinctures or pills. He liked the old school style of rolling your own joint. When I finally tried smoking it for the first time, I remember feeling like north and south had switched places. It was so freaky cool. For a while, this sense of direction switching was my indication that the high was kicking in. It must have been indica because I felt like I was sinking into the couch and I was just so heavy. I felt I couldn't pick myself up even if I had wanted to. I felt drunk and happy. And the next day when I woke up and didn't have a hangover, I was an instant fan. The second time I tried it, however, I had combined it with alcohol and ended up puking my guts out. Bit of advice, don't do that. Every time I made a trip out to California to visit my dad, I would load up on vape cartridges and take them home with me to Texas, where it was illegal. I was taking quite the chance getting caught flying with weed, and it made me nervous, but I had found that weed helped my depression instantly and more thoroughly than any prescription antidepressant I had ever been on in my whole life. I decided to stop with the prescription antidepressants and replace them with this much more natural version. It has worked like a charm ever since. I did a ton of research on strains and kept a journal of how each one made me feel, because of course I did, and what kind of high it produced. I had to maximize what I purchased and took home with me because my trips back and forth to California were limited and I really had to stock up. I started watching more documentaries about the benefits of marijuana and how it helps so many people and how the government has made it into something that it never should have been. Marijuana and hemp have been nothing but beneficial, but it seems our government turned it into a racial issue and it's been demonized ever since. I will be very happy when it is finally federally legal. I think it's ridiculous that people all over the United States must suffer when there is a natural alternative to antidepressants and painkillers, not to mention it helps cancer patients and kids with seizures, and it's right at our fingertips. My ex-husband had stories from his high school days of experimenting with a few drugs other than marijuana. He could never partake in the weed with me and the neighbor. He was too afraid that his government job might drug test him, and I respected that. I loved hearing his stories from his teenage years of trying acid and feeling like he was getting sucked out the car window. Again, he had lived a little more than I had in this regard. I wished I could have had the chance to try it out for myself one day. I was curious about it after opening my mind to weed. I guess in a way it really is a gateway drug. Song White Lines by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. I always had a very good relationship with marijuana. I was a very functional user. I eventually transitioned from vaping it to ingesting it in pill form or tincture under the tongue. On low enough doses, I could drive just fine, go to work, pay my bills, and do all the responsible things that a functional adult does. It never interfered with my capabilities and only made me a more pleasant person to deal with. It also took away all my road rage. I was way more laid back about other people and just generally happier altogether. I had been using marijuana every day as my antidepressant for a couple of years when I moved to California. I knew I would have to put it down for at least a month to get it out of my system in case any prospective employer wanted to do a drug test. So when I came out to California, I did. I put it down for a month. This is how I know that while I use it for a specific purpose to help my depression and anxiety, I also know that I can put it down at any time if I need to. Narc number 3 would comment to me later that he had never met anyone quite like me when it came to addiction. He had never known someone who could pick something up and put it down like I could. I kind of laughed it off, figuring I picked that trait up from my dad, who, once he decided he was quitting, made a plan and did just that. He never turned back, no relapsing. I don't know if it was his example or if it's just in our DNA, but I'm thankful that I do not have that addictive gene. I'm still not going to fuck around with heroin, though. That's one drug I will not even try. That one is scary. I think that I have mentioned before that I am big into researching things and finding out as much information as I can before making a decision. It was the same when it came to drugs. I always enjoyed watching documentaries, and documentaries about drugs were no exception. I was curious about a world I knew nothing about. I did not have any connections to get me anything that I could ever experiment with, but I was never against the idea of trying them should the chance arise one day. Well, I got the opportunity to try mushrooms for the first time in Irvine, California. I did them alone in my apartment, and it was a low dose, but it was a great introduction to how fun they are. What I ended up doing was watching Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and then walked across the street to a park where I played in the sprinklers and laid on the ground and stared at the stars, realizing just how tiny we all are in relation to everything. I had a great time. Narc number 1 was a teetotaler. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't do drugs, and liked to judge those who did. Liked to judge those that did. My grammar. I try to be good with the grammar. Read it like it's on the page. All right. Narc number 2 was my first introduction to something harder than weed and mushrooms. Narc number 2 had been a meth addict in his younger years. He told me that he had worked in the video game industry where, quote, everyone was on meth because the deadlines are insane. You have to be in order to stay awake and get the job done, unquote. I had only known of meth as being a trailer park drug where they show you the police lineup photos of faces with scabs and teeth missing. I also believed that there was no such thing as long-term meth use. I thought that the drug killed you if you stayed on it for longer than a year or two. Honest to God. I just didn't know much about it at all, other than it was supposed to give you energy and keep you up for days. Narc number 2 informed me that there was a lot more business people that used it daily than I was aware of. He said he had been a quote-unquote functional meth user for a 7-year period before getting clean. He and I shared some of the best weed experiences in my life together because we were just a bunch of giggling fools in the beginning of our relationship when we were still in the friend zone and he was love bombing me. Those memories are excellent, and I cherish them because I truly had a blast. Even though the person I was with wasn't real, I can still remember my memories fondly. Song, Drugs With You by Taylor. It was with Narc number 2 that I finally got the chance to try cocaine for the first time. I was very excited to try this because the movies always portray it as such a fun, exhilarating drug, but I was sadly disappointed. It felt like my eyes were open wider, I was not tired, and could drive home just fine. I spoke a little faster, but other than that, I didn't really feel much. I could take it or leave it. Side note, in hindsight, I think it might be because I'm possibly undiagnosed ADHD autistic, and it kind of leveled me out, but it was like 2 a.m. after I'd been drinking all night. So there were some side effects, but I think that's why it didn't really affect me. I think it just made me like awake and focused. Back to the book. When COVID hit, I felt like we all might die at any moment. Narc number 2 mentioned that anytime he felt sick in the past, all he had to do was a line of meth and then go jump in the ocean and he would miraculously recover. When number 2 and I were stuck in an apartment, With the threat of death seemingly always looming over our heads because of the pandemic, he brought up the idea of getting some drugs and trying them out. We tried Molly first. Molly, or ecstasy, was a fun little drug, very similar to meth. I always thought of it as a party drug. That's what they do at raves. But we did it in our apartment and stayed up all night playing video games on our PS4 virtual reality setup. We completed the entire game of Moss, which is a fucking amazing game, and I highly recommend it. It was a ton of fun. No sex, of course. This is number 2 we are talking about, but still fun. Song One Little Lie by Simple Creatures. Sidebar. Narc number 2 rarely left the house. He would often comment that he wanted Taco Bell or something like that. And when I would tell him to take my car and go get it, he would sulk and say no, but if I wanted to go, that would be cool. I offered him my car because his had expired tags and he was afraid he would get a ticket. So he left his car in my garage for the duration of our entire relationship and wasted my gas and my mileage, of course. No job, no car. These narcs are winners, aren't they? Even when it came to drugs, he contacted his dealer, but he stayed home while I drove to pick them up alone. Me, a single female buying drugs from a stranger for the first time ever with zero support from her so-called boyfriend because he was afraid of shitting his pants. Of course, it was my money that we spent on them too, of course. I was glad to be trying it with someone who knew what they were doing and had done it before, I'll be honest. He was stoked at the quality that I had picked up from his dealer and had me try ingesting it in a couple of different ways just to get the full experience. There are only 3 memorable sexual encounters with number 2. One was the impersonal daytime felt like rape scene. The other 2 were our experimentations with meth. They lasted all night, involved a lot of toys, porn, cameras, and first times. They also ended with him supremely frustrated at not being able to come, always chalking it up to the drug. We would only use it at night, once every couple of weeks, treating it much like you would a night of drinking. We would set up the evening and our lines or parachutes and do a short run until the next morning and then stop. Recreational use. We had some pretty good fights during the come downs, which he only half-ass informed me could be volatile. Could be. Coming down off meth renders you basically incapable of regulating your own emotions. And you are depleted of any feel-good hormones, so everything seems terrible and unlivable for about 3 days. It's a bad combination and hard to get through. It's why so many people stay addicted. The come down is really fucking rough. I felt that it was him that was making me volatile, so it was hard to say. Abuse will do that to you too. In hindsight, I believe number 2 was hoping that I would get addicted to meth. I could see disappointment in his face when I kept experiencing chest pains and told him that I was going to stop messing with it. I'm pretty sure that he was hoping I'd get addicted so that then he could use it as a form of control over me. Because looking back, I can see where he tried to gaslight or pick a fight with me on purpose, only to blame it on the drug usage and me overreacting because of a come down. Meth would always be the perfect scapegoat for abuse and gaslighting. Narc number 2 and I got our hands on some mushrooms too. And I remember him sitting at his computer, looking at the screen the whole time, while I enjoyed myself immensely in my room with music, a shower, and candlelight alone. It was awesome. The second time we tried them, we watched Hamilton together. It was fun watching all the rainbows on the TV screen, and the storyline hit so much harder when I was tripping balls. Still, with every drug I had tried so far, I was a happy inebriated person at least. I like that about myself. My default is to always be a happy person and always wanting to share my happiness with others. Song Tear You Apart by She Wants Revenge. Narc number 3 changed my relationship with meth into a relationship with Tina. Number 3 was a daily user once we got started, and he had all the paraphernalia I could have ever wanted to try to go along with it. He had been a user for so long that he had all the gear. He had quite the bong contraption, the right kind of torches, pipes, straws, bumpers, even syringes, though I drew the line at needles. He was a pro and had all the stuff. Did I mention that he had also gone to jail for drug distribution and that for a short time he had also been homeless? He was the perfect demonstration of how some people can be functional, responsible adults on drugs, and some just can't. He wallowed in his tales of woe and bad luck, which he had always brought upon himself. I figured if I was going to go down this drug path, it was best to do it with someone who was familiar with the places to go, the people to trust, and what the drug should look like before you take it, as well as how you should feel after you take it. I was running it as a lab experiment on myself, to be honest with you. I wanted to see if I could be functional on it and what that would take. I found that because I was so highly in tune with my body, I could check in and see how I was feeling and how it was affecting me depending on the way I chose to intake it that day. For instance, snorting it gave me more energy, but for some reason really affected my breathing. Smoking it made me sleepy and more into hanging out in bed and doing sex stuff. Parachuting or just swallowing it, much like a pill, was my preferred way of taking it and didn't affect my breathing as much, but all of them gave me chest pains eventually, which made me super nervous. Narc number 3 raved about how awesome injecting it felt, but I was just not down with injecting. He could do it if he wanted, however, because who was I to judge? I was the perfect enabler. At first, I thought I would just do it on the weekends, but the drug come down that lasted 3 days or more once I stopped using was not conducive to me being productive. Unlike weed, which for me has no side effects and no come down, a come down from Tina affected my productivity and ability to handle anything remotely stressful. I tried using it in different ways for different lengths of time, experimenting with which form might or might not work for me while still allowing me to keep functioning in life. While we were both on Tina, Narc number 3 and I got along great when it came to sex. I admit, the drug did make it feel fucking phenomenal. We even discussed starting a webcam channel and trying to make money. With our colorful hair and our punk rock look, plus our obvious enjoyment of what we were doing, we felt that surely there would be people out there who'd pay to watch. Honestly, I was all for it, especially since we were both broke and not really working. I was just grooming horses at the time, and any income would have been nice, so plus I felt I needed a good ego boost. But just like everything else with him, it was all talk, and he never made any attempts to actually do anything about it. Even when I encouraged him to research more, future faking strikes again. Song We're All Gonna Die by Olivia O'Brien. In my infinite wisdom, I decided that rather than experience the come down so often, it just meant I should try using Tina every day instead. After all, number 3 used it every day. I had stopped fucking around with meth while with Narc number 2 because I experienced chest pains that concerned me so much that I took myself to the doctor to get an EKG to make sure I wasn't dying. The EKG was normal. Turns out it was just an anxiety attack from all the abuse that number 2 had been inflicting on me, combined with the meth come down. It scared me enough to not really want to try it again, at least with him. Using Tina daily with narc number 3 seemingly went okay for about a week before I started feeling strange pains in my body again that concerned me. I decided it just wasn't the drug for me and put it down for good. The come down from that week-long last and final run caused my body to flip the fuck out. I honestly wondered if I was going to die. There was a radiating pain down my left arm, and it kept spasming and jerking out of my control like this. It was fucking crazy, guys. It was doing this. It had a fucking mind of its own. And I'm like, I'm gonna die because I can't stop it. I monitored my heart rate, which was in the 120s, and wrote a note to my parents, which was fun with my arm doing that, explaining that if I died, the choice to experiment with drugs had been all mine and not to blame narc number 3. It was some seriously scary shit. I thought I was possessed, and I might have been. It might have been my spirits going, what the fuck are you doing? If you don't stay off of this shit, we're going to kill you next time. And this is the way they get my attention, is by throwing my arms out. It was crazy. And no, this is not what, I'm like, oh God, someone's going to take a screenshot of this and make it look wrong. But no, it was literally like out of my control. Like my arm had its own body. It was crazy. Anyway, back to the book. Weighing the options on whether I should take the chance and go to the hospital and admit that I was on drugs or sit there and just hope for the best was traumatic. It was terrifying to experience, and enough to make me realize just how damaging meth really is to the body. I was okay with never using Tina ever again. Song Might Not Like Me by Bryn Elliott. Again, I saw the same look of disappointment in number 3's face that I had seen in number 2's when I decided I would not become a meth user after all. I get the intense feeling that he too was hoping that I would get addicted and he would therefore have more control over me. Instead, we shifted gears to trying to grow our own mushrooms. We didn't really succeed with that. It seemed like the bad energy in that house just wouldn't allow them to grow, and we only got a handful from our efforts. He did, however, have a contact we could get some shrooms from, and we always had a blast when we played with them. I had finally had the chance to experiment with the drugs I was so curious about, and discovered that I preferred the more natural versions to anything chemical or man-made. I still think of ecstasy as being fun if going to a club or a rave, but I will avoid Tina from now on. Weed continues to be my best friend when it comes to managing my mood. I am so thankful that I found it and that it works. I wished so much that it would have worked for narc number 3 like it did for me. I was hoping that he would be able to replace Tina with weed, which seems far less damaging. He didn't like it, however, and instead he used my weed usage as a comparison to his addiction to Tina. Right. Narc number 3 said I had no right to talk to him about being an addict when I was one myself, because I felt slightly hypocritical. I decided to keep my mouth shut and let him make his own choices, no matter how hard they were to watch. However, when they make documentaries about the beneficial effects of meth, I will take that comparison and that argument seriously. When you combine all the knowledge out there, it's plainly obvious that weed can be an asset, whereas meth is nothing but a ruinous, damaging, and lethal drug. Marijuana has only contributed to my creativity and my abilities to write this book. I also still use mushrooms every now and then. My favorite thing to do is take some and then sit and listen to music. Just be taken away into a world of color and emotion. Showers while tripping on shrooms also continue to be a favorite activity of mine. Pausing because I haven't done either one of those in a long time. Another fun is microdosing and going hiking, because nature and mushrooms is fantastic. Okay, back to the book. Living where I do and being able to go in my backyard and connect with nature while experiencing the effects of a psychedelic drug is truly something I think everyone should try at least once in their life. I continue to believe they should legalize all drugs, yes, even meth, because there are people like me who are curious and who can put it down, and there are those who are addicted, damn it, and there are those who are addicted that are always going to find a way to get it, whether it's legal or illegal. At least if it's legal, those who want to try it or who use it every day will know what they're getting is safe, or at least as safe as it can be. We should just legalize it all and use the benefit of the tax money to help society. I know my views are not everyone's, but it's just what I've learned from my own first-hand experiences with drugs and addicts. Okay, to anyone curious about drugs, I caution them to just be safe and do what I did. Research it as much as possible. Know your risks. That risk includes death. If you are an adult and you are willing to accept those risks, just be as safe as you can be, and then have a great time. All right, guys. Next chapter is chapter 15, rock and roll. Hope to see you then. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things, and I'll see you next week. Bye.